Have you wanted to get started on FT8 but don't know where to begin? My name is Mike, you're watching K8MRD Radio Stuff, and on this episode, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about WSJT-X to get started. This video is going to be a long one, so sit back, hop in front of your computer with your radio, and get ready to learn. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is download WSJT-X. And we can find that by simply Googling WSJT-X. We go to this Physics Princeton EDU website, and we're going to scroll down just a little bit. And here we can see installation packages. We've got Windows, Linux, and Mac. Choose whichever one is suitable for you on a Mac. So I will download this one, which I already have. Once your file has downloaded, you can go ahead and open it, and you will come to the installer. Go ahead and agree through all of this stuff. On a Windows computer, you're just going to find the file in your downloads folder. Go ahead and double click it, and the wizard will kind of do the rest, and you're done. On a Mac, you want to go ahead and drag this over to your applications. I've already done that, but there's one more step. You definitely want to open this README file because there's a couple things you need to do. We have to actually open up Terminal, which we can hit the Command spacebar and type in Terminal and bring that up, and we need to, it's basically saying we need to put this file somewhere, and we do that by copying this bit of code here. So we can Command C and then go over to Terminal, Command V, copy that in there. It'll ask for your password, put your password in there, and then you're going to reboot your computer. Once your computer boots back up, we're going to copy this line of code and put it over here in Command V. And we want to make sure that this right here is 52428800, has to do with this SH Max, whatever the heck that is. And then scroll down here. You want to visit the applications, utilities, audio mixer. So find your audio mixer, and you want to set up your USB codec for 48.0 kilohertz and make sure it's on 2-channel 16-bit integer. And now that we have WSJT-X installed, we can go ahead and launch it, and it should look something like this. Now the first thing we want to do, we need to tell WSJT-X that we want to do FT8, and we're going to do that by going to Mode, click on FT8. And then we also want to go to this Decode button and make sure we click Deep. And you will usually get a pop-up window that shows up saying stuff isn't working properly. If not, you can just select the WSJT-X tab. On a Mac, it's Preferences. Under Windows, it's going to be under Settings, and that's going to bring up this window right here. Now, on a Mac and Windows, everything that I'm about to show you for this is pretty much exactly the same. There's a couple differences, but under General tab, you want to put in your call sign, your grid square. If you have the six-digit grid square, that's even better. You can leave all this stuff the same. Under display, I have these bottom three checked for display distance in miles, transmit messages to receive windows, show DXCC grid, blah, blah, blah. And then I have double click on call sets, transmit enable, disable transmit after sending 73, calling CQ forces call first, and allow transmit frequency changes while transmitting. This transmit watchdog is just a little, if you keep calling CQ and keep calling CQ and no one comes back to you, after 6 minutes it'll just stop, so you're not transmitting, with like an unmonitored station basically. Under radio, here's kind of where we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this. At the very top, we're going to select our rig, whatever kind of radio you're using, and just about every radio you can think of is in here. We're on an ICOM 7610, so we're going to select that. Here under serial port, you're going to find, and here's where a little bit of differences are between Mac and Windows. On a Mac, you can actually hit Command spacebar, and we want System Information. And we can open this up and go down here to USB if we don't know what port we're using essentially. So here we can see this USB to UAR T-Bridge, the ICOM 7610. Notice I have two of them. I actually have two different programs that use this. So this location ID, 113230 and 113220, those are the different ports that this radio is going to be using. So you just have to pick which one of these. In this case, it's on the 113220 for WSJT-X. On a Windows computer, you're going to go to your device manager, And if your radio is plugged in, go down to where it says ports and kind of hit the drop-down box for that, and that'll show you all the different ports, the COM ports you're looking for. If you unplug the radio, it'll kind of refresh and it'll get rid of whatever you just unplugged, and then you plug it back in and kind of just note which one was not there, and after you plug your radio back in, that new port will be there, so that's how you'll see which COM port it is. Your baud rate, you can kind of, if you don't know your radio's baud rate, you could probably just do a simple Google search for it. But say on an ICOM 7300, for example, which is a very popular radio, you're going to go to Menu, Set, Connections, scroll down to page 3. You're going to set your CIV baud rate, and select your baud rate, and that's how you can do that. Data bits, stop bits, handshake, I leave those all on default. Our PTT method is going to be CAT. And under mode and split operation, mode I have data packet, split operation I have fake it. Now if your radio does not do or have a dedicated data mode, it is perfectly acceptable to use USB. Just know that you may have to widen your bandwidth to receive the entire bandwidth that FT8 uses. With split operation, you can either use rig or fake it. Rig will have your radio do it, and fake it isn't actually faking it. It's just allowing the software to do the split operation for the radio. Next, we're going to go over here to audio, and we need to find which audio sound card we are using. So, for example, with an ICOM, it's just called USB audio codec. If you're using a DigiRig or something, it'll be whatever you named that. And again, on a Windows computer, you can simply plug the computer in, go to the device manager, look at your ports. Actually, you're going to be looking at your audio, and you'll see the different devices that are plugged into the audio. And again, unplug it. Things will go away. Plug it back in. You can see which port it is. So we want to select our audio codec or our sound card for both of these. Typically, this is going to be on mono. We don't really need to mess with the rest of it. And also, to find that on a Mac, we can go back to our system information, hit audio, and here's where you'll see all the different USB audio devices that are hooked up to your computer. In my case, we're using this USB audio codec. That's the one it is, so that's the one we're going to select. Then we can go back over here to the radio tab, and hopefully everything is set up right. We can hit Test Cat. That button should turn green. And then we can hit Test PTT. That light turns red. Red is actually a good thing. That means everything is working. So now our radio works, but let's go through the rest of these. TX macros, if you want to put in something, some kind of message, this would be like the last message that you're going to send, basically the 73, which is this line right here, number 5. You can actually put custom messages, and if we close this window really quick, we can see that there's that thanks 73, good luck, so I could send that as a message. Under reporting, this part is kind of important. I like to have the prompt me to log QSO. I don't like anything to happen automatically on my ham radio log, so I have that, and that just pops up a window when we've completed a QSO. That way I can just make sure everything's right, the power, the signal report, all that stuff before I hit OK, and it saves it into the log. These two buttons I have unchecked. Then I want my DB reports to comments, and I want to clear DX call in grid after logging. You don't have to do this one. Basically what happens, this call sign right here, after I log it, it will disappear. If I uncheck that, it'll just stay there until the next QSO. Enable PSK reporting. This is going to basically, when somebody spots you or you hear them, it'll kind of broadcast that out to the spotting databases of the world. So that's a nice thing to have on, so people will know that you're on the air, or if you're looking for someone and they have that checked, you'll know that they're on the air. These servers here, these are neat if you're doing like field day or something, or special events or whatever with a group. You can use these to culminate everyone's results, all the different stations. So for example, when some of the guys were doing the FT8 off, you would actually use this secondary UDP server and set this, and that was how they were able to keep a live scoreboard of who was making contacts, what power they were at, how many contacts they made, QRP versus QRO, DX, all that stuff. So they were able to kind of tally up a scoreboard, and just made it fun. Under frequencies here, we don't really need to mess with these. These are going to have all the frequencies that are set for all the different modes that WSJT-X has, and all the common frequencies that we're going to use. If you want to add in a different frequency, you certainly can somewhere in here. Also, if you're finding that your frequency is not calibrated properly, you can do some frequency calibration in here. I've never needed to mess with any of this, but just know it's there. And the instructions for WSJT-X go in a lot more depth for this. Colors, here is where we can customize what all of these different colors that are going to be in this window that we're going to talk about in a minute mean. But you can read through here, and if you just right-click it, you can set the foreground color, the background color, blah, 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 change it to whatever colors you want. You can highlight by mode, so if you've worked someone on FT8 and maybe you want to work them on some other digital mode, it'll change that. Only grid field sort. This actually brings it down to just the first 2 letters of the grid field, which I don't completely understand, but that's what it does. Unless you're really chasing the individual grid squares down to like a really fine level, I guess you don't need that. And then include extra worked all entities, I believe that is what that is. Then you've got the logbook of the world user validation. So this is basically if people use logbook of the world and WSJT-X knows that, you can set a color for them right here, logbook of the world user. So if you just want to hunt people who are logbook of the world users, so you know that you get that confirmation, you can kind of have it highlight that. And then over here, advanced, there's really nothing that you would typically need for FT8 anyway, but one thing I do want to note is this special operating activity. If you check that, say you're on field day, and you would check this field day, and then here's where you would enter in your class and section. So usually I'm 4 Alpha, North Texas. If you're doing Fox and Hound, if you're a Fox, you check that. If you're a Hound, you check that. That's more contesting type stuff, but just know that's where that lies. Okay, so now we can hit OK to get out of here, and you can see we've already been decoding signals here, but let's take a walk around the screen here and familiarize ourselves with this program. So this program is actually broken up into 2 different windows. We have this spectrum graph, which I kind of have hidden, and then we have this main body of the software, let's call it. But let's take a look at this spectrum graph waterfall, if you will. So everything on here is very customizable. This bins pixel is going to adjust how wide of a bandwidth you see. I typically keep mine on 3, and that way I have 3,000 hertz of bandwidth here. This is basically the whole bandwidth of the FT8 spectrum. And I start at 0 hertz down here. You could start it on 100 if you want to bring it up a little bit. Averaging is going to be how fast this waterfall goes, 1 being the fastest, and it goes all the way up to way faster than, or way slower than you'd ever want it. But that's how you can adjust the speed of the waterfall. The palette here, you can change the actual color of the waterfall to whatever you want, whatever suits you best. I typically just leave it on default. Then we have this flatten. This is actually for the spectrum graph, which I have off. I typically leave it off, but it does have a spectrum graph here. And flatten is just going to kind of smooth it out and make it a little more easier to read. You can change this from, so this is current, so you can see everything's kind of moving pretty fast. Cumulative is going to basically average the signals, and you can adjust the height of these with these sliders here. So it's a little customizable there. You can kind of play around with that and do whatever you want with it. I typically keep the spectrum graph off just because I want to see the first couple lines of the waterfall, but you can do whatever you like. If you have 2 monitors, you can bring this graph over to another one and maximize this whole screen, so you can pretty much do whatever you want there. Looking at the main screen here, this is kind of where we're going to be doing all of our hamming, as it were. This left screen here is going to be everything that our radio is decoding for this entire bandwidth, okay? And if we look here on the spectrum graph, we can see this red and green bar. This is where we're actually, the red is where we're transmitting, the green is where we're receiving. So if I want to transmit over here, but I want to see who this signal is, I can click over there, and as it decodes, wherever this receive bar is, that's going to show up here. We can also move this around. We can right-click and set receive and transmit. So if we want to find a clear frequency, we can double-click it, or we can hit the command button on a Mac, or the control button on Windows, and it will move both of them together. So that's a neat little thing to have there. So you can move your frequency around. Looking at this row of buttons here, This first one we have CQ only, so this is reading all of the QSOs that are happening right now. But if we only want to see people who are calling CQ, we can go ahead and check this. I typically leave this off because sometimes I have people on my ham alert that I'm looking for, so I can kind of scroll through even in the white and see if I can at least hear them, or the computer can hear them, so I'll know they're out there. Log QSO I've never needed to use, but this is a pop-up that'll happen after you've already made a QSO. But for some reason, if it glitches, maybe that's why that's there. Literally never needed to use that. If you want to just stop everything, hit the stop button, everything stops. Transmit stops, monitoring stops, everything stops. Monitor, hit monitor again. You can see we've moved back to monitoring and receiving signals. We can uncheck that, and that will also stop it. But the stop is going to just kill everything. Erase, if we had things over here, if we click it once, it would erase everything on this side. If we double click it, we can clear out both sides of the window. This decode isn't actually a button, but notice it just flashed there. That does it automatically. The decode for the software is going to happen in the last couple seconds of it, and you'll see this just kind of flashing just so you know that it's decoding. Enable transmit if I wanted to call CQ. So right now my message is CQ-K8MRD EM20. This box is checked, so if I wanted to call CQ, you just check that. Now you can see it's calling CQ. And I did just hit Halt TX because I didn't want to actually transmit. So if you need to immediately stop your transmission, you can hit Halt TX. Then we also have this tune button here. The tune button you're going to use in conjunction with this power slider. It's important every time you change bands or when you're first getting up. One, you may just need to kick your antenna tuner into gear. So that's basically going to put your radio into transmit mode. But you want to monitor this slider. So you can see we're putting out 100 watts there. But watch the ALC. We want to be mindful of that. We really don't want any bit of ALC. So we want to bring this slider down till we kind of get rid of that. If you don't have an ALC meter, that's okay. You can really just kind of crank this up till you see maximum power. Start sliding it down until your power starts to drop a little bit. And per the instructions for WSJT-X, that should be a good enough power setting to get a good clean signal out. If you overdrive this, you're going to start splattering on the bands, and you're going to start causing interference to other guys. So you want to always be mindful of that power slider in your ALC. Again, every time you change bands, every time you set up for the first time, just go ahead and hit tune and check your levels there. It's a good practice to be in. Now, taking a look at the left here, this is where we're going to change bands. So it'll automatically change your radio, change the frequency, everything. But again, mind we tune and do the ALC thing for that. So this is how you can change bands. It does it all automatically. Now note this little bar right here. Notice this is green. That's our receive input, and we definitely want to keep that in the green. If we have too high or too loud of a receive input, that'll turn red, and that will actually prevent you from hearing different stations. So if you're overdriving your input, that's a bad thing. So we definitely want to monitor that. On a Mac, I have absolutely no idea how to change the input volume. It kind of just does it. I've never needed to. I've never had it in the red. It just works. On a Windows computer, the way you're going to do that, you're going to go into the hardware and sound through your control panel, I believe it is. Then you're going to go to Manage Audio Devices. You're going to click on the Recording tab. You're going to double click whichever one is your sound card. Then you're going to click on Levels. And then you're going to adjust the slider, and you can see how it's going up and down, and it's in the red, and it's in the green now, and looks like probably about 69 is a good setting for my Windows computer, so we'll leave it at that. Moving on, here is the frequency that we're currently using. We're on 10 meters, but if we change that, say we're on 40, you can see. And if we're using different modes in WSJT-X, there's going to be different frequencies, so that's where you can see what frequency you're on. This is going to show who you're currently or had worked in the past. You'll see their azimuth. You'll also see their distance in miles because we checked that earlier. The lookup and add, I've never really needed to use. I couldn't find a lot in the instructions on what they were, but I've never, ever needed to use them, so you probably won't need to use them either. Moving over to this section here, we have transmit even first. So basically, FT8 is timed in 15-second increments, and you can either transmit on the odd numbers or you can transmit on the even numbers. So typically I like to have transmit even first selected. You certainly don't have to, though. Sometimes if you're not making contacts, maybe everybody's calling CQ on the even numbers. Well, if you call CQ on the odd numbers, there's a good chance that you might get a station in there. Hold transmit frequency. If I've found a clear frequency where I'm transmitting, if I see another station, like let's just say this guy here, he's on 852. So if I have that unchecked, this will actually change my transmit and receive over to his side, to his frequency, so we'll basically be zero beating it. I typically like to leave this checked. If I've found a clear transmit frequency, I want to kind of hold that transmit frequency, and that way I can kind of continue just kind of holding that frequency, just like if you're doing a POTA activation or if you're just calling CQ, you're not bouncing back and forth, and that way other people will see that you're there, and they hopefully won't transmit on top of you. So just kind of a good thing to keep in mind. Here we can also adjust our transmit and receive frequency. So as I adjust this, you'll notice my red bar up here is moving. So that's a way to kind of fine-tune things. We can also hit this down arrow, and that will transfer this transmit frequency to the receive frequency. And we can also do the exact same thing. If my receive frequency is different, I can hit the up arrow, change that there. This report I've never needed to use. I'm honestly not sure what it is. This auto sequence here, I always have it checked. You can see it says check to enable automatic sequencing of transmitted messages based on received messages. So basically this is just going to kind of help automate the whole thing. And then this call first says check to call the first decoded responder to my CQ. So basically what that means is if a bunch of people are all calling you at once, kind of have a pile up, that's gonna grab the first person that it hears. Now over here, this is kind of the business section of FT8. And this is where you're going to have all the sequencing of the QSOs go through. So we'll do one here in a minute. But we're going to always kind of start with it at the bottom. Well, usually. Now we can change this. So if, say you're doing a Parks on the Air activation, I want to do CQ POTA. I can put my cursor in there and type in POTA, CQ POTA, K8MRD. And then I can change my grid square to whatever. I'm in EM20, so we'll leave it at that. And that way people will see, you'll see in the left window here, sometimes you'll see like CQDX or different messages, CQ POTA. See, there's a CQDX. He literally just typed in DX there, so he's only looking for DX stations. If you want to call somebody, this first one here is where the transmission is going to start. So let's say I want to call KC5HWB. We can simply type that in there, hit next, and then when we enable transmit, it's going to say KC5HWB, this is K8MRD, and it's going to try and make that contact. We usually don't need to do any of that because we're just going to look at we're either going to call CQ or we're going to just hunt people. So let's say here is a Canadian station. This right here is the signal report. The more close to zero or positive, the better. You'll pretty much have success typically decoding, in my personal experience, anything from about a -20 and higher. So this -24, I'm probably not going to be able to actually make that QSO. You might, if it's a real rare one and you want to try it, knock yourself out. Here's a German station. He's -12, so that's a pretty good signal. This guy's 11, so that's a very, very good signal. And we can click on any of these. Let me find a clear frequency, though. So I'll transmit and I'll fine-tune that. Let's just go on 2050, keep it even. And we will try and work someone. So this guy's -11. Now let's see. Here's a Canadian station. So we're just going to double-click them. You can see it brought his station over to the received signal. So I'm transmitting over here. He's transmitting over here, so that means I'm listening. Right now I'm transmitting. I'm saying, hey, VA3YVE, this is K8MRD. But notice what happened here. It automatically put the button here. It's got all the call signs in here, and then it's going to go through. Hopefully, if we can actually hear each other, it's going to go through this whole sequence. And see, it already did. So I gave my signal report -15. He gave his signal report -14. We're going to say Roger, Roger, 73. And the QSO should be complete here in just a second. So sometimes if you have a really good signal, notice it kind of skipped this one. Sometimes it'll do that, and I'll be honest, I don't completely understand all of the sequencing of how this works, but I have a lot of fun doing it, so we'll wait for this to continue. And there we are. So he's given 73. I just sent a 73. Notice this box, because we had that prompt to log QSO button checked. I want to be prompted. Sometimes this glitches out and it doesn't get the 73, so I want to always make sure that everything is right. So in this case, typically I do transmit with 69% power. We were actually on 100% that time because I was using sideband earlier. So I'm going to change that. I like to click these retains, so these are checked. So it's going to send, when I upload this ADIF to my logging software, it's going to upload this signal report as a note, and it'll upload the power as well. So I just like to know these things. I don't really care about operator or exchange or what. You can change whatever you want in here. Name, you can do that kind of stuff. But I just want to double check that I usually have the power changed, and now I just changed my power level down. So the next QSO will be lower power, and that's it. And notice all this cleared out. We're back to the CQ. So now if I want to just call CQ, I'm just going to check this button. I'm going to hit Enable Transmit. Notice I'm on a clear frequency here. And now we are transmitting. And then it's going to receive for 15 seconds. I kind of hit transmit towards the end of the cycle, so not much data got out. So we'll go ahead and wait another cycle. We'll give another CQ, and all of the activity, because our transmit and receive are currently selected here, we're calling CQ. My ALC is a little high. Go ahead and turn that down. All right, now we're putting out a good clean signal. And for some reason on a Mac, when I slide this down, yes, this slider goes up. It's weird. It just is what it is. And now we can kind of start to see a little bit. It looks like there's a weak station coming back to us. Yep, so now we've got a couple people here. And because we have this call first, this WB8JUI, that's who it picked up first, even though we decoded two people at the same time. And we're just exchanging signal reports. I'm saying roger, roger, roger. And that's it, 73. And now we're back down to 69%, because why not? So I'm going to go ahead and change that. And this retain, usually I run the same power, so just by hitting this retain button, it'll just automatically save that for you, and we can hit OK. Now let's go ahead and work this guy, because he called us, so we can just go back and double click on him. Notice it populates all this stuff. So if he's still sitting around waiting for us to come back, I'm calling him right now. If he hears me again, he'll come back, and we'll end up working each other. So it doesn't look like he's coming back, so he might have gone off. So we can just hit enable transmit again, and that will... We can do one of two things. If we hit enable transmit and uncheck it, it'll continue to transmit throughout that cycle. If we want to just stop it, you can hit halt transmit. So either way you can stop it. Or if you accidentally click on someone's call sign, like maybe you want to click on this guy, oh wait, I didn't mean to hit halt transmit, and that'll immediately stop the transmit cycle. Now the last thing to do is actually get these logs into our logging software. Very simple. If we just click on File, we're going to go to Open Log Directory, and we're going to be looking for wsjtx_log.adi. This should be exactly the same on Windows and Mac. And I'm going to right-click this. You can export this. I'm just going to right-click this and open with my logging software, which is called Aether. And that's going to log. That's going to show every single log that I have in WSJT-X currently. And you can go ahead and make any changes if need be. I have a lot of these already saved in my logging software. So we are going to open my main logging software and look for the mode. So the last FT8 contacts I have in my logging software were from 9.8. So anything after 9.8, so I'm going to grab this 9.15 to the 10.6. I'm going to right click that and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to my main log, hit new QSO, paste that into there. Here we can see there's some of the logs that I just added. I can go ahead and upload these to Logbook of the World or whatever you want to do to it. And if I want to export this, I can just right click it and copy that. And let's say I just want to paste it to my desktop. I can paste it there. There it is. And I can email it. I can do whatever the heck I want to it. Now I have that ADI file to do whatever you need with. So however you want to log it, whatever you do with that, that's how you get it. Another thing to note, WSJT-X typically saves an audio file of every single QSO you make, which might eventually take up some hard drive space, so you can actually delete your WAV files here by doing that. If you want to erase all of your contacts for some reason, you can do that. If you want to just start fresh, so that's all found under the file. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully that gives you some good insight as to how to get started in WSJT-X and using FT8. And next video, we're going to go ahead and talk about Grid Tracker, which is a very exciting program. So if you do have questions, please feel free to drop a comment below, or you can email me, k8mrd@icloud.com, and I'll try and help you out as best I can. In the meantime, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at k8mrd, and we'll see you again on another episode of K8mrd Radio Stuff. 73, guys.